Hi, this is Liv Morgan, and you are listening to No One Knows, a deep dive podcast into the mysterious death of JoAnn Matouk Romain.
Are you ready for our first eyewitness? The eyewitness who places Tim Matouk at the water's edge on the evening of January 12th, 2010. Paul Hawk. It's a name you're going to hear a lot throughout this case. If you're familiar with the case, you've already heard his name numerous times. But if you've never heard this case, buckle up. Paul Hawk is going to be the changing point for this investigation. January 19th, 2010, just 7 days after JoAnn would go missing, Paul Hawk would show up to the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department. It would be after seeing a few news reports of the missing woman that he had remembered something odd that had happened the night of January 12th, 2010. Through the records that the family had subpoenaed, here is a direct quote from Paul Hawk's witness statement. Quote, "On January 12th, 2010, I went to Farms Market, Fisher Road. Near dusk, while driving home, Morris and Kirch, I saw a woman sitting on the edge of the break wall across from St. Paul Church on Lakeshore. She was wearing black clothing and had dark hair. Two vehicles, one dark navy blue and one unknown color, parked in the right lane nearest the lake that were impeding traffic. As I passed, I saw two men. The first man was Caucasian, over 6 feet tall, and about 240 pounds or more. The second man had darker features, darker hair, eyes, complexion, 6 feet or under, weight about 200 pounds or less. Both men were wearing long dress coats. Given the events of the past week, I believe these unusual, abnormal, bizarre circumstances may be related to the woman who is missing from GP Woods. Diagram below." End quote. I know it can be hard to visually imagine if you've never seen St. Paul's Catholic Church on Lakeshore. So in our Instagram post on No One Knows Pod, I will attach Paul Hawk's witness statement along with the diagram that he drew for officers. Back to our timeline. It would be 1 year later that JoAnn's daughters would receive a phone call from Paul learning about who he was. He had just seen news coverage of the daughters pleading about their mom's case. Paul Hawk informs Michelle and Kelly that he had come forward to police officers just 7 days after JoAnn had gone missing, but before her body was found. After that initial conversation that Paul had with officers, he had never heard back from police. Once Michelle and Kelly had heard about Paul Hawk, they came together and they had hired an expert to help them create a sketch of one of the people that Paul had seen at the water's edge. I will also attach this image to our Instagram page at No One Knows Pod. This is a sketch that Paul Hawk described to a sketch artist that was drawn up. If you have ever seen Tim Matouk, this is uncanny. So why did Grosse Pointe Farms not tell the family about Paul Hawk? Why was he not brought up? Why didn't they give any information? Now, if you're going to say it's to keep the integrity of the case, I'm going to disagree with you. Because Grosse Pointe Farms has mentioned that they think Paul Hawk was not a reliable witness. But I have a hard time understanding that. I did bring this up a few times to JoAnn's daughters when we've been talking about the case, looking at, witnessing reports, looking at further reports, and while investigating. They said Paul was an unreliable witness. But from what I can see, all the documentation that has been subpoenaed, Paul's story never wavered. Paul never knew JoAnn. He never knew JoAnn's family, JoAnn's children. Paul had nothing to gain from this. He was firm on what he saw that night in front of St. Paul's Catholic Church. He was firm in see something, say something. To speak with Paul on what he saw that night would be everything. Unfortunately, Paul did pass away. So the next best thing I could do was to reach out to Paul's brother, Kenny Hawk. Here's my interview with Kenny Hawk on what Paul received. The harassment, the scaring, everything that he had endured after coming forward about JoAnn's suspicious death. Testing 1 2 3. This is Liv Morgan, and today is Thursday, February 29th, 2024, and this is the interview with Paul Hawk's brother, Kenny Hawk.
Hello, this is Kenny.
Hi, Kenny. It's Liv. How are you?
Good, Liv. How are you?
I'm good. Do you still have time to chat today?
Sure.
Perfect. Okay. I wasn't sure how to do your calendar. I wasn't sure if I should reach back out to you, so I wanted to just make sure.
All good.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm Liv. It's nice to meet you officially. I've heard a lot about you
as
from
well.
Michelle and Kelly.
Yeah, they're sweethearts.
I love them.
And such a tragedy.
I know, it really is. I keep telling everybody, I'm like, I think the easiest part of doing this entire podcast is just having Michelle and Kelly, like, by my side, like, rooting. You know what I'm saying? They make it very easy to get whatever information I need to get, details, anything. So, yeah. And what I've read about your brother, too, Paul, I'm so sorry. I mean, he seemed like a very incredible person.
He was, and we miss him a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so are you okay that this is on the record recording and we're using this in the podcast?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So I have some questions and we'll kind of just go through there. I would say my podcast is a lot more organic naturally. So as we're talking, if we kind of lead to other things, at any point, if you want to go off the record, just let me know and I will pause the recording and then we'll move forward after that.
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so first, could you just introduce yourself for me?
Sure. Kenny Hawk. I'm the older brother of Paul Hawk.
Perfect. Awesome.
Dad and father of 6.
Oh my goodness, you have 6 kids?
6.
Oh, that's so fun. Okay.
Six amazing kids, 4 daughters and 2 sons.
Oh my God, I love that. That is so cool. Where do you guys live at?
Southern California, a town called Hidden Hills, just north of LA.
Oh my goodness. So you're all the way out there. Okay.
Yes.
So where were you? Were you guys born and raised in Michigan? Kind of tell me about your guys' life growing up.
Yeah, born in Detroit and raised by a single mom. She raised 3 of us, myself, Paul, and Tony. And then we eventually got to the suburbs by high school. So got out of the ghetto of Detroit and into Grosse Pointe for a good high school education. And then went to University of Michigan, worked in technology, became an entrepreneur, and been building companies ever since.
That's amazing. Love it, love it, love it. So tell me about your brother Paul, about your guys' relationship. Tell me about who he was, things like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Paul is just a gentle giant. He is an amazing football player from the time he was a little boy. Played at DSL in Detroit and then Grosse Pointe South. Took his team to the state championship. Very much a leader, and even went back into the game after he was injured. Won the game, but tore up his knee. Had a full ride scholarship to Michigan. The famous football coach Bo Schembechler had come to our living room to recruit Paul and convince him to go to Michigan because he had offers from a bunch of top 10 schools. He accepted that offer to play in Michigan, and then, like I mentioned, hurt his knee in a high school game, won the game but destroyed his knee. Michigan dropped the scholarship and ended up playing at Central Michigan instead. And that was always a bittersweet thing for Paul. He did what he thought was right for his teammates, but took a big personal sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And was never quite the same as a football player after that injury. But just a kind, great uncle, very involved in all of his nieces and nephews' lives, went to all their games. And he also was intellectual. He got his master's in art history at Vilnius University in Lithuania. So he lived abroad in Lithuania for several years. Did a second master's back in the States, and was always involved in loved art. He worked with my mother at a small art gallery in Grosse Pointe called Trondy Art Gallery.
Okay.
And it was definitely family focused. He never married, but loved kids, and like I said, it was a great uncle.
Yeah, I mean, 6 from you. Now, what about your other brother, Tony? Does he have any children?
Yeah, Tony. Tony passed away just 2 weeks before Paul passed away. So November of 21.
Oh my
He has
gosh.
two beautiful daughters and a beautiful son. His oldest daughter is now a dentist. His son is serving in the Coast Guard and just got accepted into the officer program there. So he's serving our country, protecting against the bad guys. And then my niece is a junior in high school at Grosse Pointe North, all A student, and we're hoping she ends up going to Michigan as well.
Oh, how cool. Full circle, huh? I love that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that Tony had passed just 2 weeks before Paul did.
He did.
Okay, now was that natural causes?
We'll never know. He got jumped outside of his house between his car and his front entrance. The neighbor found him the next day. He was still alive. Lived 3 more days, and then the doctor said he was brain dead, so they took him off life support.
Wait, he was jumped?
Yeah, he's bruises all over his body, and we'll never know what happened, but it could be foul play. We'll just never know.
Oh my God, I never. So, back to Tony for a second. What was his job? What was he like in the community? Things like that.
Yeah, so he worked in Ann Arbor for a home renovation company. He'd been up there for 5 years, commuting back and forth between Ann Arbor. He'd live in Ann Arbor during the week, and then come home on weekends to spend time with his kids. Mainly by that time, just his youngest daughter was still in high school. The other 2 were already off on their own. Very much a family man. Loved his kids. Great sense of humor. And we really loved the outdoors. Loved jogging. Loved working with his hands. And super funny. Great sense of humor.
Wow.
He'd always have people laughing.
Yeah,
he had struggled earlier in his life with some substance abuse. Had been clean 5.5, 6 years when this happened, and he had served as a DEA informant for the Southeast Michigan area, and so one of the things we're always wondering is, one of the people he informed on have something to do with him his early passing.
Yeah, that would make sense. It happens, as sad as it happens more times than not, especially with informants, especially after they get clean and things like that, and they're kind of out of that part of addiction, but then they're coming back to serve and help in other ways. Oh, that's so unfortunate. I did not know that. So I'm kind of like a little struck right now because I knew he had passed, but I didn't know, the reasoning, if it was natural causes, things like that. So when they did his autopsy, there was nothing obviously in his system. You said he was clean and everything like that, which would obviously lead you guys back to more so foul play than anything.
And we didn't know he was a DEA informant until after his passing.
Yeah, that's how tight-lipped it was, huh?
Well, typically you don't publicize stuff like that.
Yeah, right. not aside from that, not even family. Just to keep it between himself.
For sure.
Keep you guys safe too.
We should focus on Paul and the things that he witnessed and what he dealt with.
Yeah, so that's my next. Yeah, that's my next question. So I obviously have all the reports. Go ahead a little bit in details in your words how Paul became involved in JoAnn's case, just from what he spoke to you about and things like that.
Sure. So Paul, on the night of JoAnn's murder, noticed cars pull over on the side of the road, thought it was odd, and also noticed the individuals that were there. And came, once JoAnn was reported missing, he came forward to the police, and the police treated him like a nuisance versus a witness that might help find. At that time, they claimed that she was missing. The police claimed she was missing. So it also struck him as odd the way they treated him when he came forward. Normally, when you've got a missing person, you're happy to talk to anybody that might have any information. They'll help you find somebody. Instead, they treated him, as if he was a problem, which was odd. And I remember it struck Paul as odd. He's the kind of person to do the right thing no matter what. Like I mentioned, going back into the football game in high school, even though he was injured himself, to help the team win. He had nothing to gain. He didn't know the Matouk, JoAnn Matouk. Didn't know the daughter. No reason for him to get involved. Nothing. There's nothing that's going to benefit him out of it. But he was raised Catholic. He was very involved in Catholic church. Went to church almost every Sunday. Was quite religious, and just believed in doing the right thing. And so, when he came forward and they almost shoot him away, that was very odd. And then over the years, once he did a statement and even had a sketch drawn of who he remembered seeing, it's very much a dead ringer for the main suspect.
It's very uncanny looking at. Very, very, very uncanny.
Yes. And just, you look at the rest of the facts of the case, JoAnn telling your daughter that if anything happens, here's who did it. Who says that unless there's something going on and you're under some kind of pressure? Also, what was quite odd, the police coming to the daughter's home saying that the mother is missing and the car is not even registered to the mother. How would they know there was a mother in that car?
There's so many holes in this case. But for me, sorry, go ahead.
But for Paul, what he endured, those next 10, 12 years was continual harassment from the local police. They would park in front of his house. They'd show up at his door. They would, show up multiple cars and try to intimidate him. Basically trying to send the signal, back off, or you're going to have. You're going to be the one that's next.
Yeah.
And he had reached out to me multiple times saying, hey, if anything happens to me, here's who you look at. Dan Jensen, the chief of police, and Matouk. And he was quite worried about it. And over the years, there were several, we'll call it independent journalists that did stories, including a Netflix story that was, a total hack job. They left out 90% of what they discovered in the interview. He thought, finally, the case is going to get solved and this will be put behind me and the bad people will be put away. And then it would, it'd fall apart. There's a case in the state of Michigan. He thought for sure there are going to be indictments. And then, of course, nothing happens. So, the level of corruption and, backdoor influence, it just ate at him. And he really... And many folks in our family, my mom, myself, we talked to him and said, Paul, it's just not worth it. It's not worth, destroying your life to continue to go through this. You've done the right thing. You've made the statements. You've testified. You've done really all you can do. Just let it go and move on with your life. And he couldn't. He said, I can't just let it go. I've seen something. I can't unsee it. I have to do the right thing. Even if it means something happens to me, I'm going to do the right thing. His take was it's always the right time to do the right thing. And there's never a convenient time to do the right thing. And, I really feel for him because he took it to heart. And he really felt horrible that the people that committed this heinous crime, have still not seen justice. Or consequences for their actions. I mean, who walks into a foot of water to commit suicide in a freezing cold lake? It walks 400 yards offshore to get to water deep enough to drown. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, there's so many holes in the story. And for me, all of the different specialists that I've talked with, the divers, everything, I'm looking at this now going, how the hell how did they go about covering this up? Because there's, like you said, there's such a level of corruption within it. But I think with Paul, even going back to when he first came forward, like looking at the report that I have his initial report, January 19th, he went to the officers and put down a witness statement. So a week after JoAnn goes missing, and they're already writing him off. And whenever I'm going back and reading, testimonies from officers and depositions, they're stating, well, his story was as inconsistent, it changed. From what I'm seeing, Paul's story never changed.
Never changed. And they also didn't follow up with him, didn't really ask any clarifying questions. Because, I think the reason is they already knew what happened.
Yeah.
One of theirs had killed her, and anything that was inconsistent with that, they were going to ignore. And Detroit's had a lot of corruption over the years.
Oh, for sure.
You would think in this time frame that it had been cleaned up, and Grosse Pointe, being the beautiful suburb it is, would be free of corruption like that. But clearly, it's not. The other thread that we had heard is that the liquor store in town, the high-end wine shop that the family was involved with,
yes,
allegedly had been moving drugs through that liquor store, and that may be the root cause of all this. That JoAnn had known about that, came forward, and the cousin threatened her, and he decided to go forward anyway, and that's why they offed her.
Yeah, so we've actually uncovered some new evidence. Michelle, Kelly, and I, we've been looking at the phone records, and there was some phone calls that was missed by investigators kind of leading up to. Obviously, you have to think, too, we're 14 years later. So technology now, being able to look back at the phone records, we have a greater chance of leading it back to somebody. There's more of a paper trail now. So we've actually uncovered some evidence in here showing basically like the hit being called, if that makes sense. So there's a phone call between Tim and the liquor store, Tim and Bill, and then there's a few trucking companies that we've been able to figure out. And we've always said that either she had to have been taken to the Canadian side. So whether that be by truck, by boat, but right just 2 days before she goes missing, they're talking to 3 different trucking companies, I think, and then also the boating company. It's the middle of winter. Why are you contacting a boating company? It's just odd things that now we're kind of putting pieces back together, and all of it kind of leads right back to the liquor store, which I agree. I think that I think it's more than drugs, though. I think it's probably some sort of sex trafficking as well. Not saying that JoAnn wouldn't have been vocal about drugs, but I think she already had some inkling about that. I think it was more than that, because she had also gone, it hasn't been confirmed, but she had said she had gone to the FBI. And I wanted to ask you, too, because I have it on my list. Did Paul at any point go to anybody outside of Grosse Pointe officers?
He did. He went to the state police. I don't have all the notes in front of me here, but yeah he's gone to other folks, and he wanted to go outside of the local area. But again, it's like the blue code. If it involves the police, nobody wants to get involved.
Back the blue, right? Yep. Blue backs the blue. Yeah. So let's talk for a second. When Paul died,
and by the way, I'm a huge supporter of law, ethical law enforcement.
Yeah.
The rule of law, holding people accountable. But what is not okay is when the folks that have that power abuse it in a situation like this.
100%. I agree. And who then at that point, when those people of authority, run with it, who holds them accountable?
Exactly.
That's the biggest question here for me. So I want to go.
And sorry, I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
And you have to ask, what does Paul have to gain from this?
I agree.
Absolutely nothing. There's nothing but headache for it. threats, and trying to attack his character, the nonstop harassment. It's not like there was a personal benefit, a financial benefit. He's got no skin in the game other than doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth noting too that Paul had no relationship with, like you said, JoAnn. Even though they all grew up in the same area, they didn't know each other. There was no,
Correct.
like you said, no benefit for him to continue to come forward. And the biggest thing for me too is he came forward with the eyewitness account before it was ever made public that Tim Matouk was a suspect. It's not like he came forward years later and said, hey, this is who I saw. He literally came forward a week after and said, this is what I saw. These are the people that I saw. This is what they look like. Here's all the information. And I feel like that's kind of been misconstrued over the years between when you're speaking, or officers are speaking. They're saying, oh, well, he was unreliable. His story changed. And it's like, but that's not true. There's no record of that. The record's very clear.
Absolutely.
And I have a hard time. I feel for Paul because it's like like you said, he saw something. He wants to do the right thing, So I want to go to when Paul passed, kind of lead me up to maybe that day or a few days before him being found, things like that, if you're okay with doing so.
Yes, it's a tough memory, but yes.
Yeah. Whatever you can remember in your words.
So, yeah, I remember like it was 10 minutes ago. Brother Tony had passed just a couple weeks before, and we'd had his funeral, and lots of family and friends, including all of Paul's friends, were at that funeral. It was just brutal, saying goodbye to our little brother.
Mm-hmm.
Paul was very torn up over it. And back in California, I was in Michigan for all that, helping my mom and the kids and everything. Came back to California, and about 2 weeks and a couple days later, I get a call from my mom, and she said, she was crying, and she said, Paul's dead. I said, no, Mom, Tony passed. It's going to be okay. And she goes, no, Paul's dead. And I didn't register at first that she was relaying that Paul had now died, and she was hysterical. I had to pull over. I was on the Highway 101 driving south from the Bay Area. I had to pull over. I just couldn't believe it. And she said that they hadn't heard from him in a day. Sent somebody over there to check on him, and they saw him on the floor of his kitchen in his robe. And his buddies, I believe it was Corrado. Do you know Nino Corrado?
I do not know who that is. Who is that?
That's one of his buddies from high school. It was Mark Ficcini, Nino Corrado, and Pete Miniacci, three of his good buddies from high school. They'd all met over there, and they're banging on the door, but no answer. And then finally, they looked in through one of the windows and saw him on the ground. That's when they called the police. But he was dead, and he had his wallet. One thing that was odd is he had his wallet with him while he was wearing a robe. Now, he could have gone to the store. There's a little party store, like local grocery store, party store right across the street from where he lives. So maybe he'd gone to that store before he went to bed or something. But they say it was a heart attack, and have to believe that. But it's hard to believe. Just one dies, another one dies 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm. So his autopsy came back as a heart attack.
Yeah, it was a heart attack.
Okay. But heart attacks can be brought on by anything, truthfully.
Yes.
It could be sudden,
Yes.
It could be long-term, it could be fright, it happens multiple different ways. Do you think it was somebody that hurt Paul, or do you think it was the case that hurt him?
I mean, he was healthy as an ox. I mean, he still played soccer. Like I said, he's an athlete his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
There were no real signs leading up to that. Like I say, just seeing everybody 2 weeks before, And it's kind of odd. It's like he had his wake while he was alive. He'd seen all of his closest friends just 2 weeks before for our little brother's wedding. My little brother's funeral.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about here, just reliving all this stuff.
I'm sorry. And at any point
But,
it's too much, we can totally stop. I want you to know that.
Thanks, Liv. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't
But-
I can't imagine. 2 weeks after your little brother passes, then now you have Paul that passes. I mean, so
Yep.
immediately you're in California. You come back to Michigan, I'm assuming, correct?
Yep, came back to his second funeral, and my mom. I had no idea how my mom's had the strength to get through that. I can't imagine losing a child, let alone two.
Is your mom currently still living?
She is.
Wow.
Yeah, she'll be 80 this October.
Wow.
But it just it still doesn't sit right. That in my gut, it feels like there was something else going on there.
So he passed in Grosse Pointe. Was his autopsy? Do you know who his autopsy was completed by?
Yeah, I have it in my records. I have to look it up.
Okay. If you would want to share it with me, I would love to see, because the more I'm looking at JoAnn's records too, I'm thinking that the cover up is also as deep as obviously the medical examiner. So I'm curious, like you said, in your gut that something's not right. I'm curious if it would be somebody within the same medical examiner's office or even the same ME, which would further then say, okay, did this actually happen? Did he actually have a heart attack? I find it odd somebody who's as healthy, playing sports, being active, is in, he's a witness in a murder investigation, and then all of a sudden ends up dead. It's just very odd.
Yeah, the whole thing stinks.
Yeah, how do you think Paul would want his legacy to go on? And how do you think that we can honor him in continuing to fight for JoAnn and justice, and not forgetting Paul, and not, making sure he gets the recognition and his legacy for all the things that he did?
I would say the see something, say something. The authorities repeat that often. If you see something, say something. So that's step one. But step two is have honest officials that follow through on that and actually care about justice. So, I say Paul would want everybody, if they see something, to say something. You do the same thing he did. But hold the public officials accountable to follow through. And that comes through voting.
I agree.
You have to vote. You have to vote. You have to vote with your actions. You have to vote with the actual vote. And not accept, a banana republic kind of justice system.
And so who's going to hold these?
America should be better than that.
Yeah, and who's going to hold these officials accountable when they don't follow through and they don't hold up to the law and justice and things like that? It's further than just a corruption. It's so large.
Yeah. And apathy is the enemy of democracy and the enemy of freedom. If you do nothing, you'll end up with tyranny, and I think that would be a shame if that's what ends up happening. To, not to just Detroit, Grosse Pointe, but to our country. And Paul, God bless him, stood up and did the right thing, and I think he paid the price for it. The 10 years of turmoil, maybe his death, but for sure 10 years of abuse for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Even if his even if who he thinks did not do it, to intimidate a witness like that, it's just not how the justice system is supposed to work.
Yeah, Michelle and Kelly actually shared the text with me that he was sending them screenshots and of him saying, hey, this person was just in front of my house. And the biggest thing for me is the SWAT training across the street. I'm like, what? How is that even legal?
Of all the places you can do it, you're going to do it right next to a witness's house.
And
that's not a coincidence.
yeah, what? So the harassment, obviously, that I did read that he had some tar on his vehicle. Officers for Grosse Pointe were in, woods and farms and back and forth. He said that, he'd be in a place and then all of a sudden the officer who was, you know, suspect in the case would be driving next to him or driving behind him or.
Yep.
What is there anything else that we need to add with that too that may have happened that I have not mentioned?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
And for his legacy is for people to do the right thing, to keep doing the right thing despite these unethical, evil people.
I agree. And I think the see something, say something is going to be the title of this episode because I think that says a lot to who Paul was and his legacy.
Absolutely. I know he would like that.
Yeah.
And I know he's up in heaven joking around with our little brother Tony, and he's in a better place, but it doesn't make it any easier. We all really miss him.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry for your guys' loss. And like you said, continuing to say and speak, and the whole point of this podcast is to be an investigative podcast and to be vocal. And I think that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I think that the more we continue to talk about something and keep bringing it into the forefront, at some point, somebody's going to crack. You just got to figure out who.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that we're close. I have an intuition gut feeling. I think that looking back at the records and looking back at Paul's everything that he's written and sent, but then even aside from that, the other people that are associated with Tim Matouk and his character and who he is as a person, I think that says a lot. His ex-wife she said straight in her deposition that he could make somebody disappear. And now there's two people that have wound up dead in correlation with a case that he's involved in. It's not coincidental.
And the guy's still employed by the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
Which is
insane.
How is that ethical? I don't understand that. How can you be, and there were crimes that he had committed against children, and he's still employed by the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
I didn't hear about the crimes against children.
Yes, hang on, I gotta go off the record. 1 second here.
Okay. I'm happy to be in touch with you. If you think of anything else or if anything breaks, please let me know.
I will. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of bring up some old feelings and past feelings and new feelings, everything, to talk about Paul and everything he endured, and I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. We all miss him and love him.
Thank you so much. And then I will send you the link to this episode, and if you want to share it with your friends and family, feel free to.
Will do.
But thank you again. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.